Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, back in my hotel room after a busy day, my second in Kolkata and my fourth, I think, in India, so fifth of the whole trip. Woke up really late this morning. Obviously, the night before I'd been on the train and I never sleep that well on sleeper trains, so I kind of caught up on the sleep and woke up and had a lazy morning with a breakfast come lunch at Momo. Wow, Momo. So these Momos, as I mentioned before, I had them for the first time last night. They're basically gyoza, but they're a Himalayan thing, and they have them with all weird sauces. And this morning I tried them with a kind of soup that comes with it. I think it's called tulpa. And again, this must be some kind of Himalayan soup. It was nice. It had a bit of a kick to it, but it was good. And apparently they are the thing at the moment. They are the cool thing to eat. The trend in India. Momos. So you heard it here first. Anyway, that was that. What I did this morning, it was a day of religion, which I guess is setting the scene for a lot of this holiday coming up. I went in and over the bridge, the Howrah Bridge, and took a taxi this time to a metro station, and then went on the Kolkata metro. Now, first of all, went through an area of the city that was really, it was again all imperial buildings that were all falling apart and really run down, and there was creeper vines and trees growing up part of them, including the old Silver Mint. And it's such a shame because this must have been a grand city back in its day, and it's all gone to rack and ruin. And one thing I heard is that they had a communist government for a long time. And the communists, in a well-intentioned way, put in rent controls to help the poor. But all that happened is that people were paying pennies for rent, but then the landlords didn't do the buildings up, so they all fell down. Don't know how true that is. And at the end of the day, well, is that any worse than people having to pay exorbitant rent? Don't know, really. But certainly this city does look very sorry for itself. And, as my friends on the train might be saying, India's growing at 7% per annum under Mr. Modi, but he doesn't seem to be sharing the wealth out very well. And certainly not much coming to Kolkata. So that's that. Anyway, got to the metro, at the Mahatma Gandhi station. It was a nice kind of mural of him as he went in, but it was a very shabby looking metro, and for a city this size there's only one line, and but it's very well used. I mean, literally it was crammed when I got on, and it was crammed all the way. I never got to sit down, but I travelled for quite a considerable length from the kind of north end of the city to the south, because I was going to a place called the Kali Durga. Now, Kali is a goddess, and she is the dark goddess. And she's one that is not often understood very much in the West, because it's like people are worshipping evil. She's often depicted with skulls and stuff. Why would you worship that? But I read a book on her a few years ago, and I can't say she's a particular goddess that I'm attracted to in much of a way, but the idea is that, well, whilst there is light, there is also darkness, and Kali is this recognition of this, and that's why people are devoted to her. One thing I did learn, talking to a friend later in the day, is that the Hinduism of this part of India is very much focused on goddess worship, and so it's there's not so much Krishna and Ram and that, which you'll get more in Uttar Pradesh. But it's all different female deities. Now, don't quite know why that is, but Kali is big here. Although she's presented very abstractly, with these huge eyes, and it's this kind of smooth pillar with a very cartoonish face painted on. And yes, and so that's Cali. But this temple is, although I think it dates from the Victorian period now, and it was falling down and being done up. It's actually very ancient. Many people think it's where Kolkata gets its name from. But it was nice. But what struck me so strongly when there was a queue to go up, and there was a load of hassle from like the Brahmin, the Shrine Guardians, and you know there was a street going up where you could buy stuff to offer to the goddess, and there was all this jostling, and then when you go in there, it is powerful. But there's also all this kind of, right, give us donations and you can get a bit extra. Give me some money and we'll let you climb in with Cali and stuff like that. Is it just reminding me of the worst excesses of all the dargas in Pakistan? And, this may be offensive to some, but it's just, I'm being honest as to what I found. Like, it's literally, they're the same thing. These Sufi shrines and the Hindu temples are the same devotion. They've just swapped a deity for a saint's tomb. But the practices are identical, and I felt like I was back in Pakistan at these dargahs. And in that way, I enjoyed it because it was very powerful. There is, what I will say with the Hindus, more than the Sufi dargahs, is there is something primeval going on there. The flickering flames, these simple ancient mysterious deities, like you're going back to the beginning of mankind's like relationship with the gods, and that temple even more than the others because it was in an enclosure, and they had these huge studded gates in this wall, and they reminded me of like the gates of a Mesopotamian temple. So going right back to the kind of Neolithic age, it's great, and I'm really glad I went. I had a good time, even though it was, quite hassly. After that, stopped for a cup of tea, saw some bookshops, so I had a look at some second-hand books, and then I decided to go to my second religious site of the day, which was far more familiar to most people. So I was back on the metro to Park Street, and then I got a taxi to take me to Mother Teresa's mother house. So this is basically the convent where she lived. Well, at least that's what I told the taxi driver, and he's like, yeah, and then dropped me off by St. Paul's Cathedral. I'm like, no, that is not Mother Teresa's mother house. And he's like, oh. And then he got back in, took me round to the other side of St. Paul's Cathedral here. I'm like, no, that is the same church as we thought. And I think for him, Mother Teresa was just any church. I'm like, no. So then he asked people on the street, and eventually we got there. And it was in an area that looked actually quite a Muslim area of the town. But what I will say, because there's a lot of controversy about Mother Teresa, but it had an atmosphere of very simple, humble piety. There were sisters from her order there. But there was very little, there was nobody wanted cash when you went in. And it was she has this large, very plain stone tomb. And it was a place where you could pray and reflect. And I found it quite moving. And the thing is, people are critical of her because of her stance, particularly on contraception and abortion in a place where, people were having babies they couldn't afford, and there was AIDS going around and stuff. And there's a lot I could criticise Mother Teresa about, and, a lot of people have criticised her, particularly Christopher Hitchens, but in the end of the day, I actually think that her intentions were genuine, and I know in her diaries people have said, well, she had doubts, and it's kind of dark night to the soul thing, but so do a lot of religious people, and in any way that often makes their faith more genuine. But she was a remarkable inspiration, and I was almost in tears actually in places when I was looking through the exhibition about her life, and I went to her room where she lived, and then I moved on, and my next stop was it was a bizarre area. It's called Canning Road. And it was this chaotic, bizarre area. And the reason I went there is I was going to a shop that sells like paper plates and cups and stuff like that. And the reason I was going there is I had someone to meet. Now, before I tell you about him, an interesting thing about paper plates and cups, there were no plastic ones, and I noticed for all the takeaway food, it's wooden forks. And so I did ask him, seeing as that was his business, like, where are the plastic plates? And he said, no, they've passed a law that it's all got to be biodegradable now, so it's all paper or cardboard and made from sugar cane and stuff. And I actually think, I can be very critical of the Modi government, and I can be very critical about India, and the place is a filthy tip. But it is nice to know that stuff that's being thrown away will disintegrate. And I think that is a massive step forward. And I remember, in the 90s going to Albania, and not 90s, the noughties, going to Albania, and there were just plastic bottles everywhere, and thinking, my God, it will take millennia for these to disappear. And at least we're beginning to recognise that. But that's an aside. So the chap I was meeting, his name is Owais Arslan, and he is an interfaith activist in Calcutta, and he does a lot of work promoting interfaith harmony, particularly with the Jewish community. And he has like a great grandfather or something who's Jewish, so he has a connection with the Jewish community. But he's a wonderful man, and you may remember when I went to Pakistan, I met with a chap called Chaman Lal who did interfaith work there, and it's actually I've got an interfaith friend in England who connected me with both, and they do know each other. But he was a really inspirational chap, and we went to the synagogue, which I don't think is open to the public, but I went inside, and they had pictures on all the chairs of all the hostages that are to be returned. The Jews want returning from Hamas captivity, which I was particularly impressed with, because it's actually I think there's only about 5 Jews left now, and it's actually the Muslim Guardians have put those pictures up for them. And I think, well, isn't that refreshing, where it's also polarised in Britain, and you've got to be one side or the other, and you've got this Muslim community, and I'm not saying they don't have compassion for Gaza, because they certainly do, but they've also got compassion for the other side, and I think that is so wonderful, and that's a model that so many people could look at and follow. And we had a look around there. Also went under the synagogue in the kind of basement where they keep lots of treasures from the community. It was really interesting. And then he took me. It was the Maghrib prayer, so he took me to the mosque that he goes to, which he says is several hundred years old. It looked new than that to me, but it was a pretty impressive mosque nonetheless. And he showed me how to do wudu, and then I watched them at prayer. And then we had a really good chat about politics and about religion and interfaith stuff in the courtyard of the mosque. And it was wonderful, because a lot of the questions I've had he could answer in a balanced and mature way. So we did talk about India's politics. One thing he said is that, with regards to Modi, so the problem is the opposition to him is very splintered. So there are a lot of people who do oppose Modi, but they're all in different groups. So I thought that was quite interesting, and he was also, I thought, remarkably compassionate about the situation at Ayodhya. He was saying, well, it's done now, let's move on from it. And I thought, what an inspirational man. And on the way back, we went back into the bazaar, and he very kindly bought me some street foods. It's a wonderful chat, and had some. It was like he called them barges, but they were like fried chapatis with a kind of sauce and stuff, and some lassi. And then back in the shop, I met his mum, and she was very lovely, and she's travelled all around Britain. She went on a trip from Land's End to John O'Groats. There we are. Yeah, wonderful lady. And then I came home to my hotel. So been a busy day, but I think I've now seen what I wanted to see in Kolkata. I do have half a day tomorrow because my train is in the afternoon, but so it may be that I will be visiting a church, because Oasis knows leader of the Church of North India who said he would try and get me to meet. But whether that happened or not, I don't know. The fact is, I've had a great little break here, but the pollution and the filth of the place is getting to me, and I want to leave. I want to go to somewhere a bit cleaner, a bit quieter. And Partners Next, which I'm not that excited about as a place, although I should be meeting Abhishek there again. But it's also the gateway to all the Buddhist sites, and the one I really want to see is Bodh Gaya. So this is me, Uncle Travelling Matt, saying. मेरे साहिबा मेरे